This is a classic, climb to the top, narrative where the protagonist's scars have become his armor. Michael's journey is defined by scarcity trauma, the deep-seated fear of returning to a state of helplessness. His refusal to be complacent isn't just a work ethic. It's a survival mechanism triggered by those early memories of loss and abandonment. Here is a breakdown of how these dynamics play out in Michael's current world. The contrast of the two women. Michael is at a crossroads where his past, Amaka, meets his potential future, Tonya. His choice reflects whether he wants to heal his old wounds or protect his new life. Feature: Amaka, the past; Tonya, the future. Connection: shared struggle and history. Fresh start and shared values. Pipe: emotional trigger, reminds him of his greatest failure, poverty. Represents the success he has built. Pipe: core conflict, she left when things were hard. Can he trust her now? She is humble and hard-working, regardless of his status. Pipe: the verdict, the cautionary tale. Rejoining with Amaka might feel like winning the past, but it risks reopening old wounds. The growth path. Tonya offers a partnership that isn't burdened by the trauma of who Michael used to be. Pipe: why Amaka shouldn't be the one. Even though the encounter was emotional, Michael's principles make a reunion with Amaka nearly impossible for several reasons. The trust gap. Michael's policy of not mixing pleasure with business is a shield. Hiring Amaka creates a professional conflict, but dating her creates a personal one. He likely wonders, does she love Michael the man, or Michael the CEO? The ghost of poverty. To Michael, Amaka is a living reminder of the time he couldn't meet needs. Being with her might constantly trigger the feeling that he isn't doing enough, no matter how many millions he has. The abandonment complex. Like his rich uncles who left after his father died, Amaka left when the resources ran dry. For a man who values loyalty above all else, that is a difficult bridge to rebuild. The appeal of Tonya. Tonya represents a different kind of rich. While her father is a manager within Michael's empire, her character traits, humility and hard work, align with Michael's core identity. She doesn't see him as a rags to riches miracle. She sees him as a peer in discipline. Greater than the power dynamic. Because Michael is her father's ultimate boss, he will have to be careful. However, her background as the daughter of a hard-working manager suggests she understands the grind without being defined by the same desperation Michael once felt. Greater than. Michael's story is about a man who has mastered his external world but is still navigating his internal one. He has the money to pay any hospital bill now, but he's still looking for the partner who would have stayed even if he couldn't. The air in Michael's executive office was always meticulously controlled, but today, a strange current of unease had slipped past the advanced climate system. He sat behind his imposing mahogany desk, the city sprawling indifferent below his panoramic window. Across from him, Amaka, his university girlfriend, sat rigid on the sleek visitor's chair. Her face, framed by a professional bob, was a mask of conflicting emotions. When his assistant had first announced her name for the interview, Michael had felt a jolt, a phantom limb ache from a past he thought he'd amputated. He had decided to conduct the second interview personally, a move his HR team found unconventional for a mid-level marketing position, but one he knew he had to make. As she entered, the years fell away. The subtle scent of her perfume, a sophisticated evolution of the cheap body spray she'd worn in university, hit him first. Then her eyes, the same deep, thoughtful eyes that used to gaze at him with adoration, now held a mixture of professional composure and a fragile vulnerability. Amaka's revelation and reaction. Amaka had sailed through the initial stages, her qualifications impeccable on paper. It was only when she walked into the CEO's office, a room she'd mentally pictured as cold and impersonal, that the nameplate on the desk shattered her composure. Michael Okoro. The name echoed the past, a name she'd whispered countless times, a name she'd mourned, then painstakingly erased from her daily thoughts. Her breath hitched. For a moment, the polished room swam. Her carefully rehearsed answers, Her professional facade crumbled. "Michael," she breathed, the single word a raw whisper that ripped through the silence. Michael watched her, a silent observer of her internal earthquake. Her cheeks flushed, then paled. Her hands, clasped in her lap, tightened until her knuckles were white. He saw the flicker of recognition turn to shock, then to an almost desperate shame. The confident candidate dissolved into the girl who had once shared his dreams, and then, crucially, left them. "Amaka," Michael acknowledged, his voice a low, steady rumble, betraying none of the turmoil churning within him. He watched her regain a semblance of control, though her eyes darted around the room as if searching for an escape route. I didn't realize," she stammered, her voice barely audible. "I mean, the company is huge, but I never connected it to you." She swallowed hard. "This is awkward." Michael leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "It appears so," he stated, neither confirming nor denying the underlying tension. He knew what she was thinking. The impoverished university student she'd left behind was now the titan sitting opposite her. The irony was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. He saw the unspoken question in her eyes. "Do you remember? Do you forgive me?" But Michael wasn't ready to answer those questions. Not here, not now. He shifted gears, forcing the conversation back to business. "Your resume is impressive, Amaka. Let's proceed with the interview, shall we? Tell me, why do you believe you are the right fit for this senior marketing manager position?" Amaka, though visibly shaken, was a professional. She took a deep breath, and slowly, painstakingly, rebuilt her composure. She answered his questions with competence, her passion for marketing evident, but the underlying tension remained, a vibrant hum beneath her words. Every glance, every pause, was laden with the shared history. The CEO's dilemma, the job offer. After the interview, Michael dismissed Amaka, promising HR would be in touch. He stared out the window, the city lights beginning to twinkle as dusk settled. The decision weighed heavily on him. Arguments for offering Amaka the job: merit, she was genuinely qualified. Her experience and skills would be an asset to the marketing department. Denying her the job based on personal history felt petty, and against his own principles of meritocracy. Professionalism, it would prove, to himself and to his staff, that he compartmentalized his life. Business was business. A clean conscience, it might be a way to finally close that chapter. By giving her a fair chance, he could mentally declare their past debt settled. Arguments against offering Amaka the job: emotional contamination. Her presence in the company would be a constant, unwelcome reminder of his past vulnerabilities, his poverty, and the pain of abandonment. It would make it harder to leave that part of his life behind. Workplace dynamics. How would he, as CEO, interact with an ex-girlfriend who once broke his heart? The potential for awkwardness, gossip, and even perceived favoritism or prejudice was immense. Trust. Could he trust her? She had left him when he had nothing. What would happen if, God forbid, the company faced a downturn? His deeply ingrained fear of abandonment resurfaced. He ran his hand over his face, a sigh escaping him. Offering her the job felt like inviting a ghost to live in his present. Not offering it felt like letting his past dictate his future in a negative way, hindering a potentially competent employee. The upcoming first date, Tonya's allure. While grappling with Amaka's situation, his phone buzzed. It was a text from his mutual friend, Bola. "Hey, Michael, remember Tonya from my birthday? She's free Thursday night. Still up for that dinner?" A small smile touched Michael's lips. Tonya. The thought of her was a stark, refreshing contrast to the storm Amaka had stirred. He pictured her face from the party, warm, genuine eyes, a humble demeanor that hadn't changed even when she discovered his identity. Her laughter had been easy, her conversation engaging and intelligent. Tonya represented everything he was looking for now. No past baggage, she was a blank slate, untainted by his struggles. Their connection was new, built on shared moments of the present, not haunted by the ghosts of the past. Authenticity. She didn't know him as the impoverished student. She knew him as Michael, and her interest seemed genuine, not influenced by his wealth or status. Her humility and hard-working nature, traits he deeply admired and lived by, were what drew him to her. She wasn't dazzled, she was simply herself. Potential for a future. With Tonya, he could build something new, something that wasn't about proving anything to anyone, or healing old wounds. It was about shared values and a fresh beginning. The choice, the dichotomy was painfully clear. Offer Amaka the job. This would be a professional, magnanimous gesture, but one fraught with personal risk, potentially compromising his hard-won peace and the professional boundaries he so fiercely maintained. It would be a constant reminder of his past. Reject Amaka for the job. This felt harsh, almost cruel, and perhaps like allowing his personal history to negatively impact a professional decision. It also risked feeling like a lingering resentment. Go on a date with Tonya. This was an escape, a step towards a future free of his past shadow, a chance at genuine connection with someone who respected him for who he was now, not who he had been. Michael stared at Bola's text message. His thumb hovered over the reply button. The CEO of a conglomerate, a man who made multi-million-dollar decisions daily, found himself caught between the echoes of a painful past and the quiet promise of a hopeful future. The phone vibrated again. Another reminder from HR about follow-ups on the marketing position. He closed his eyes, picturing Amaka's tear-filled eyes as she left him all those years ago. Then, Tonya's bright, unburdened smile at the birthday party. His principles screamed for professionalism and to move forward. His heart, or what was left of it, yearned for a genuine, uncomplicated connection. He opened his eyes. The city lights beckoned, a vast, indifferent canvas awaiting his next brushstroke. He had to make a choice that would define not just his company's next hire, but potentially, the trajectory of his lonely, powerful life. For Michael, the decision was less about a sudden epiphany and more about a gradual, profound realization of what peace actually felt like. He eventually directed HR to offer Amaka a generous recommendation for a subsidiary company, ensuring she was taken care of professionally while maintaining the boundary his soul required. With that door closed, he turned his full attention to Tonya. The courting of principals. Their first date wasn't at a flashy, five-star restaurant where Michael was the big boss. Instead, at Tonya's suggestion, they went to a quiet, botanical garden cafe. Michael, usually armored in bespoke Italian suits, showed up in a simple linen shirt. For the first time in a decade, he wasn't looking over his shoulder for a hidden agenda. Tonya spoke about her love for her work, her respect for her father's dedication, and her own dreams of building a community foundation. She didn't ask about his profit margins. She asked what he did to find silence in a noisy world. The romance of the mundane. Late-night drives. Michael found himself leaving the office at 6 p.m., a feat previously thought impossible, just to drive Tonya to the night market or watch the sunset. Shared values. They bonded over Hard Work Sunday, where they would sit in silence, both working on their respective projects, finding intimacy in shared ambition. The hospital visit. The turning point came when Michael's mother had a minor health scare. Tonya stayed in the waiting room for 12 hours, bringing Michael coffee and holding his hand, not because she had to, but because she genuinely cared. It healed a part of Michael that had been broken since his father's death. The proposal, a promise of stability. Michael didn't propose with a flash mob or a billboard. On a rainy Tuesday, the kind of day that used to remind him of being cold and hungry, he took Tonya to the small, cramped apartment building where he lived during university. Standing on the worn pavement, he handed her a velvet box. "Greater than, in this spot, I once felt like the world had forgotten me," Michael whispered. "I want to spend the rest of my life ensuring that with you, I am always home." Greater than. The royal wedding, a fusion of worlds. The wedding was dubbed the event of the decade, But for Michael and Tonya, it was a testimony. It was held at a private, sprawling estate, decorated in gold, ivory, and emerald green. Element description: pipe dash 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 pipe dash 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 pipe. The venue, a cathedral-style glass marquee overlooking a lake, lit by thousands of fairy lights. Pipe. The guest list, a mix of global industry titans and the humble staff Michael had worked with for years. Pipe. The procession. Michael's mother, draped in the finest lace and glowing with health, walked him down the aisle. Pipe. The vows. Michael promised not just his wealth, but his time, the one thing he used to believe he had to sacrifice to stay rich. Pipe. The royal touch. Tonya looked ethereal in a custom-made gown with a 12-foot train, but it was her grace that stole the show. Even amidst the champagne towers and the performances by international artists, she made sure to stop and thank every server and usher. When they danced their first dance to a soulful highlife rendition of a classic love song, Michael didn't look like a CEO or a multi-millionaire. He looked like a man who had finally stopped running. He had traded the ghost of his past for the queen of his future. The contrast between Michael's past and his future was never more apparent than on his wedding day. While one woman represented the pain of what he had lost, the other represented the peace he had finally earned. The vows, a covenant of healing. As Michael stood at the altar, the sunlight filtering through the emerald and gold drapes of the marquee, he didn't look like the shark of an industry the world knew. He looked like a man who had finally put down a heavy burden. He took Tonya's hands, calloused slightly from her own hard work, yet warm, and spoke without a script. "Tonya," he began, his voice thick with a rare, raw emotion. "For a long time, I believed that love was a luxury I couldn't afford. I thought that to be successful, I had to be a fortress, cold, impenetrable, and always on guard. I lived my life looking over my shoulder, waiting for the moment the people I loved would leave when the resources ran dry. But then I met you. You didn't fall in love with the CEO. You fell in love with the man who was still trying to prove his worth to the world. You showed me that loyalty isn't bought with a bank balance, it's built in the quiet moments, in the way you stayed by my mother's side, and in the way you challenge me to be more than just a businessman. Today, I don't just give you my name or my fortune. I give you my vulnerability. I promise to never let my past hunger dictate our future. I promise that in our home, you will never have to wonder if you are enough, because you are my greatest extra. I vow to be the partner who stays, not just when the storehouses are full, but when the world is quiet and it's just us. You are my peace, my partner, and my home." The aftermath, Emeka's path. While Michael was stepping into a new life, Emeka was forced to confront the wreckage of her own choices. The rejection from Michael wasn't a cruel dismissal, but it was a firm closing of a door she had hoped to reopen. The initial shock and realization, when the HR department called Emeka to inform her that she wouldn't be moving forward for the senior marketing role at the headquarters, but instead offered her a high-level position at a prestigious subsidiary in a different city, she understood the subtext immediately. Michael was taking care of her, but he was also moving her out of his line of sight. She spent that first night in tears, not just because she had lost a job, but because she realized she had lost the man. Seeing Michael in that office, seeing the stature and the unshakable principles he had built, made her realize that she hadn't just left a poor boy years ago, she had walked away from a king in the making because she couldn't see past the struggle. The transformation. Emeka did something Michael didn't expect. She took the job at the subsidiary and used it as a catalyst for her own growth. The letter, a week before the wedding, she sent Michael a brief, dignified note. She didn't ask for him back. She simply wrote, "Thank you for the grace you didn't owe me. Seeing the man you've become helped me realize the woman I need to be. I am happy for your happiness." A new independence. She stopped looking for a rich man to meet her needs and started focusing on the hard work Michael had once lived by. She became one of the top performers at the subsidiary, eventually moving on to start her own boutique marketing firm. Closure. On the day of the royal wedding, Amaka didn't crash the gates or send a desperate text. She spent the day at a spa, intentionally disconnecting from social media. She chose to let go of the what-ifs, and finally began the process of forgiving herself for leaving when things were hard. The final contrast. At the wedding reception, Michael's mother leaned in and whispered to him, "You chose well. My son, this one has a heart that matches yours." Michael watched Tonya laughing with her father, the manager who had raised a daughter with such integrity, and he knew his mother was right. He had successfully navigated the most difficult merger of his life. The merger of his traumatic past. Intimacy of marriage is where Michael truly found his footing. Before they reached that sanctuary, however, one final ghost from the past appeared to test the strength of their foundation. The encounter, the shopping trip. 2 weeks before the wedding, Michael and Tonya were in an exclusive bridal boutique district. Michael, usually one to delegate such tasks, insisted on being present for Tonya's final accessories fitting. As they stepped out of the boutique, arm in arm, they ran directly into Amaka. She was coming out of a high-end stationery store, clutching a folder of marketing mock-ups. The air turned brittle. For a split second, Michael's old instinct, the one that felt he had to apologize for his success or hide his pain, flared up. But then he felt Tonya's hand shift slightly in his, a steadying, grounding presence. Amaka's reaction. She froze. Her eyes went from Michael's face to the massive diamond on Tonya's finger, and finally to Tonya herself. Amaka didn't see a rival. She saw a woman who possessed the one thing she had lacked, unconditional belief. The conversation. "Michael," Amaka said, her voice steady but soft. She turned to Tonya with a sad, respectful smile. "You must be Tonya. I've heard wonderful things. Congratulations to you both." Michael nodded, his posture regal but not unkind. "Thank you, Amaka. I trust the transition to the subsidiaries project is going well." "It is," she replied, and for the first time, she looked Michael in the eye without the weight of the past. "I'm learning that building something of my own is better than trying to reclaim what I didn't help build. I wish you both a lifetime of what you deserve." As Amaka walked away, she didn't look back. Tonya waited until she was out of earshot before speaking. She didn't ask, "Who was that?" with jealousy. Instead, she looked at Michael and said, "She looks like someone who finally found her own way. I'm glad you gave her that chance, Michael." In Guy moment, Michael realized Tonya wasn't just his wife-to-be, she was his moral compass. The first conversation, the billionaire's silence. After the last vintage Bentley had driven away and the echoes of the live orchestra had faded, Michael and Tonya finally stood alone in the master suite of their new home. The room was filled with the scent of white lilies and the distant sound of the ocean. Michael began to unbutton his tuxedo jacket, his movements slow. He looked at Tonya, who was sitting at the edge of the bed, finally unpinning the heavy silk veil from her hair. "It's quiet," Michael remarked, his voice barely a whisper. "Is the silence scary?" Tonya asked, looking up at him with those perceptive, humble eyes. Michael walked over and sat on the floor at her feet, a gesture of total surrender he would never show the world. He rested his head on her knees. "For 20 years, I've had a noise in my head," he confessed. "The noise of debt collectors, the noise of my mother's hospital monitors, the noise of people telling me I wasn't enough. Tonight, for the first time, it's gone." Tonya ran her fingers through his hair, untying the knots of tension he'd carried since his father died. "You spent so long building a kingdom to prove you couldn't be hurt again," she said softly. "But you don't have to rule tonight. You just have to be Michael." "I was worried," Michael admitted, looking up at her. "I was worried that the ghosts would follow me into this room. That I'd look at you and still feel that boy who couldn't pay a bill." Tonya leaned down and kissed his forehead. "That boy is the reason you are the man I love, but he isn't the man I married today. I married the man who saw his ex-girlfriend in need, and gave her a job instead of a grudge. I married the man who wakes up early not because he's afraid of being poor, but because he's grateful for the day. They sat in that silence for a long time, not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of completion. Michael realized that his wealth hadn't bought this peace, his choices had. The morning after, a new policy. The next morning, Michael didn't wake up at 5 a.m. to check the markets. He stayed in bed, watching the sunlight hit the wedding band on his hand. When Tonya woke up, he didn't talk about business or the conglomerate. "What are you thinking about?" she asked grossly. "I'm thinking," Michael smiled, "that for the first time in my life, I'm not running away from anything. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Would you? The first year of Michael and Tonya's marriage wasn't just a honeymoon phase, it was a restructuring of a soul. Michael, who had spent decades treating his life like a fortress under siege, finally began to lower the drawbridge. The first anniversary, a legacy of grace. For their one-year anniversary, Michael didn't buy Tonya another diamond or a skyscraper. Instead, he surprised her by unveiling the Okoro More Foundation. Under Tonya's gentle influence, Michael's business-only policy evolved. He realized that while his father died poor because of a lack of opportunity, Michael now had the power to create that opportunity for others. The foundation focused on 3 pillars that mirrored Michael's own scars. The maternal health fund, clearing the hospital bills for struggling families, ensuring no mother was held hostage by a debt she couldn't pay, a direct tribute to his own mother's struggle. The Stay in School grant, supporting university students who were working multiple jobs to survive, giving them the breathing room Michael never had. The Entrepreneurial Seed, providing microloans to hard-working individuals who, like Tonya's father, possessed integrity but lacked capital. On the night of their anniversary, sitting on the terrace of their home, Michael handed Tonya the charter for the foundation. "You taught me that wealth isn't a shield to hide behind," he said, watching the moonlight reflect in her eyes. "It's a tool to build bridges. I'm not afraid of the past anymore, Tonya. I'm excited for the future we're building for others." The parallel path, Amaka and Abina. While Michael was expanding his heart, Amaka was busy rebuilding her life. True to her word, she had stopped chasing the finished product and started looking for a partner she could grow with. She met Abina, a junior investment banker at a mid-tier commercial bank. Abina was everything Michael hadn't been during their university days, stable, but still climbing. He was earnest, a bit stressed by his targets, and deeply in love with Amaka. For Amaka, loving Abina was a form of penance and healing. She was finally staying through the struggle of a man building his career. The full circle encounter. The irony of life reached its peak when Abina's bank set a grueling target for its junior staff. They needed to land at least one high-net-worth individual to open a corporate account. Abina, unaware of the deep history between his wife and the CEO of the Okoro conglomerate, spent weeks drafting a proposal for Michael. One afternoon, Michael's executive assistant walked into his office. "Sir, there's a junior banker outside, an Abina. He's been here 3 days in a row. He says his wife encouraged him to be persistent, though she wouldn't come inside with him." Michael looked out his window and saw a familiar car in the parking lot. Inside sat Amaka, waiting for her husband, her face a picture of quiet support. She wasn't trying to use her past to get a favor. She was simply standing by her man while he did the hard work. The meeting in the boardroom. Michael granted Abina the meeting. The young man was nervous, sweating slightly in a suit that was neat but clearly not bespoke. He pitched with a fervor that reminded Michael of his own younger self. "Sir," Abina concluded, "I know we are a smaller bank, but we will work 10 times harder for you than the big firms. I just need one chance to prove my worth." Michael looked at the proposal, then at the window where Amaka waited. He saw the symmetry of the universe. Years ago, Amaka left because she couldn't handle the wait. Now, she was sitting in a hot car for hours just to support a man's dream. She had finally learned the lesson. and Abina was the beneficiary of her growth. The decision. Michael didn't open a multi-billion naira account. That would be bad business, but he did something better. He signed a modest corporate payroll account over to Abina's branch. "I'm opening this account not because of your bank's interest rates," Michael said, standing up to shake the stunned junior banker's hand. "I'm opening it because persistence and a supportive partner are the two greatest assets a man can have. Tell your wife, tell her she chose a good man to stand by." The final reflection. When Abina ran out to the car, cheering and waving the signed documents, Amaka wept. They weren't tears of regret for Michael, but tears of relief for her life with Abina. That evening, Michael told Tonya about the encounter. They sat together, two people who had navigated the complexities of ego, poverty, and pride to find a love that was simple and true. Michael realized that by letting Amaka go and choosing Tonya, he hadn't just saved himself, he had allowed everyone involved to find exactly where they belonged. The CEO who once feared complacency had finally found the ultimate luxury, the grace to be kind.